The courtroom was cold that morning. Not the kind of cold that comes from poor heating, though the radiator in the corner wheezed and rattled like it had given up years ago, but the kind that settles into your bones when you know something isn't right. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting everything in a pale, clinical glow. Outside, the streets of Portland were already awake, cars honking, people rushing to work, the world moving forward like it always does. But inside courtroom 4B, time seemed to slow down. At the defense table sat a boy, 14 years old. His name was Marcus Chen, and he looked smaller than he should have. His public defender, a woman named Helen Garrett, mid-40s, with tired eyes and a briefcase held together by duct tape, sat beside him, flipping through a stack of papers that seemed thinner than it ought to be. Across the aisle, the prosecution had 3 people, 3 lawyers, 2 paralegals, boxes stacked waist-high. They looked ready for war. Marcus didn't. He wore a polo shirt his grandmother had ironed that morning. She'd pressed the collar twice, even though it didn't need it, because she didn't know what else to do. His hands were folded on the table, fingers laced together so tightly his knuckles had gone white. He didn't look at the judge. He didn't look at the gallery, where a handful of people sat, some reporters, a few courthouse regulars, his grandmother in the back row, clutching a rosary she hadn't touched in years. The bailiff called the court to order. Everyone stood. The Honorable Judge Raymond Caldwell entered from his chambers, black robe trailing behind him like a shadow. He was in his early 60s, silver-haired, square-jawed, the kind of man who looked like he belonged on a campaign poster. He'd been on the bench for 17 years. He'd seen it all, or so he thought. He sat down. Everyone else followed. Case number 47CR 2019, the clerk announced. State of Oregon versus Marcus Chen. The prosecutor stood first. His name was David Brennan, and he had the kind of smile that made you feel like you were already losing. He adjusted his tie, straightened his notes, and began. Your Honor, the defendant stands accused of breaking and entering, destruction of property, and assault. The evidence is clear. Eyewitness testimony, surveillance footage, physical evidence recovered at the scene. This is not a complicated case. The state is prepared to prove, beyond a reasonable doubt, that Marcus Chen is guilty of all charges. He sat down, clean, confident, rehearsed. Judge Caldwell turned to the defense table. Ms. Garrett? Helen Garrett stood slowly. She looked at Marcus for a moment, just a flicker, like she was checking to see if he was still breathing, and then she looked at the judge. Your Honor, my client is 14 years old. He has no prior record, no history of violence, no history of criminal behavior of any kind. What happened that night? Ms. Garrett, the judge interrupted, his voice flat. Does your client have a defense, or are we here to discuss his age and his report card? A few people in the gallery chuckled, soft, nervous laughter. The kind you hear when you're not sure if you're allowed to laugh, but someone else started. So maybe it's okay. Helen's jaw tightened. Your Honor, we intend to show that my client acted in self-defense, that the circumstances leading to self-defense, Judge Caldwell repeated. He leaned back in his chair, one eyebrow raised. He broke into a home. He destroyed property. He assaulted the homeowner. And you're telling me this was self-defense? Your Honor, if I may explain. I've read the preliminary report, Ms. Garrett. I've seen the photographs. I've reviewed the witness statements. He tapped his fingers on the bench, a slow, deliberate rhythm. So, let me ask you directly. Does this boy have a case, or are we wasting the court's time? The courtroom went quiet. Not the kind of quiet where people are waiting for the next thing to happen. The kind of quiet where people stop breathing. Helen Garrett looked at Marcus again. He hadn't moved, hadn't blinked. His eyes were fixed on the table in front of him, like if he stared hard enough, he could disappear into the wood grain. She turned back to the judge. "He has a case, Your Honor." Judge Caldwell smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was the smile of a man who'd already made up his mind and was just waiting for everyone else to catch up. "Then by all means, Ms. Garrett, let's hear it." Before we go deeper into this case, take a second and hit that subscribe button. Give this video a like and let us know where you're watching from. I'm curious to know how far these stories travel. The prosecutor stood again. He walked to the center of the courtroom, hands clasped behind his back, like a professor about to deliver a lecture. "Your Honor, the facts are simple. On the night of October 12, 2019, the defendant broke into the home of Mr. Leonard Fisher, a 63-year-old man who lives alone on Maple Street. Mr. Fisher was asleep when the defendant entered through a basement window. The defendant then proceeded to ransack the living room, breaking a lamp, overturning furniture, and stealing approximately $200 in cash from a desk drawer. He paused, letting the words settle. When Mr. Fisher came downstairs to investigate the noise, the defendant attacked him, struck him twice in the face, causing a broken nose and a concussion. Mr. Fisher was hospitalized for 3 days. Brennan turned to look at Marcus. The boy still hadn't moved. The defendant was apprehended 2 blocks away, still carrying the stolen cash. He offered no explanation, no apology, nothing. He turned back to the judge. "This is not a complicated case, Your Honor. This is not a gray area. This is a crime, a violent crime, committed by a defendant who knew exactly what he was doing." He sat down. Judge Caldwell looked at Helen Garrett. "Your turn, counselor." Helen stood. She didn't move to the center of the room. She stayed at the defense table, one hand resting lightly on Marcus's shoulder. He flinched just a little, but he didn't pull away. "Your Honor, my client did break into Mr. Fisher's home. That is a fact. He did take money from the desk. That is also a fact. But the prosecution has left out the most important fact of all." She paused. Marcus Chen was running for his life. The judge's expression didn't change. "Go on." 6 hours before Marcus entered Mr. Fisher's home, he was at his own home, a 1-bedroom apartment on the east side of Portland. He lived there with his mother, Angela Chen, and his younger sister, Emma, who was 9 years old at the time. Helen pulled a photograph from her briefcase and held it up. It showed a small apartment building, faded brick, iron fire escapes zigzagging down the front. At approximately 9:30 p.m., a man named Vincent Cross entered their apartment. Mr. Cross was Angela Chen's boyfriend. He had been living with the family on and off for about 8 months. That night, he and Angela got into an argument. Neighbors reported hearing shouting, crashing, a woman screaming. She set the photo down and picked up another. This one showed the interior of the apartment, overturned chairs, broken glass, a dark stain on the carpet that could have been wine or coffee or something worse. Marcus tried to intervene. He stepped between Mr. Cross and his mother, and that's when Mr. Cross turned on him. Helen's voice was steady, but there was something underneath it now, something sharp. Mr. Cross was 6'2", 220 pounds. He had been drinking. He grabbed Marcus by the throat and threw him against the wall. Told him that if he didn't get out of the apartment right then, right there, he would kill him. Not hurt him, kill him. Those were his exact words. She glanced at Marcus. He was staring at his hands now, fingers trembling. Marcus ran. He didn't take a coat, didn't take his phone, didn't take anything. He just ran. It was 42 degrees outside that night. He had nowhere to go, no relatives in the city, no friends whose parents would take him in at 10 o'clock on a Friday night. So he walked, and he walked, and eventually he found himself on Maple Street. Helen picked up the next photograph. It showed the basement window of Leonard Fisher's house. Small, narrow, the kind of window a grown man couldn't fit through, but a scared, skinny 14-year-old could. He saw the window. He saw a light on inside. He thought maybe, just maybe, there was someone who could help, or at the very least somewhere warm where he could think, where he could breathe. Judge Caldwell leaned forward. So your argument is that your client committed burglary out of desperation? My argument, Your Honor, is that my client was a terrified child who made a terrible decision because he didn't have any good ones. The judge sat back. He looked at Brennan. Prosecution? Brennan stood, shaking his head like he'd just heard the punchline to a bad joke. Your Honor, even if we take the defense's story at face value, and I'm not saying we should, it doesn't change the facts. The defendant still broke into a home. He still stole money. He still assaulted an innocent man. Desperation is not a legal defense. It is when it's self-defense, Helen shot back. Self-defense? Brennan turned to her, eyebrows raised. Against whom? Mr. Fisher wasn't threatening him. Mr. Fisher was asleep in his own home when the defendant broke in. Mr. Fisher grabbed Marcus when he found him in the living room, Helen said. He didn't ask who he was. He didn't ask what he was doing there. He grabbed him by the arm and tried to restrain him. Marcus panicked. He reacted. He pushed Mr. Fisher away, and yes, Mr. Fisher fell and hit his head. But Marcus didn't attack him. He defended himself from what he perceived as another threat. Perceived? Brennan laughed. It was a short, sharp sound. Your Honor, this is absurd. The defendant broke into a man's home, and when that man tried to stop him from stealing, the defendant assaulted him. This isn't self-defense. This is a fantasy. Judge Caldwell held up a hand. Enough, both of you. The courtroom went silent again. The judge looked down at the papers in front of him. He was quiet for a long time, long enough that people started shifting in their seats, long enough that Marcus finally looked up, just a little, like he was trying to see what was happening without being seen. Finally, Judge Caldwell spoke. Ms. Garrett, I appreciate your creativity. I do. But creativity doesn't win cases. Evidence does. And from where I'm sitting, the evidence says your client committed a crime. Multiple crimes, in fact. Your Honor, I'm not finished. His voice was firm, but not loud. You're asking me to believe that a 14-year-old boy who, by your own admission, broke into a stranger's home, is somehow the victim here, that he should be excused because he was scared, because he didn't have anywhere else to go. He leaned forward, elbows on the bench. Do you have any idea how many scared kids there are in this city, Ms. Garrett? How many kids don't have anywhere to go? And yet somehow the vast majority of them manage not to commit felonies. Helen's knuckles were white where she gripped the edge of the table. Your Honor, with all due respect, I haven't made my ruling yet, Counselor, but I'll tell you right now, you're going to need more than a sob story if you want me to take this seriously. He looked at the clock on the wall. We'll adjourn for today. Prosecution, I want your witness list on my desk by Monday. Defense, you'd better come back with something more than what you've given me so far. Because right now, this boy doesn't have a case. He has excuses. The gavel came down. The sound echoed. And just like that, it was over. The gallery emptied out slowly. Reporters scribbled notes. The courthouse regulars shuffled toward the door, already moving on to the next case, the next drama. Marcus sat at the defense table, still as stone. Helen Garrett packed her briefcase in silence. She didn't look at him, not because she was angry, but because she didn't know what to say. What do you tell a kid when the system has already decided he's guilty before the trial even starts? In the back row, Marcus's grandmother stood. Her name was Diane Chen, 71 years old with hands that shook from arthritis and a heart that had been broken more times than she could count. She made her way to the front of the courtroom, moving slowly, one hand on the pew backs for balance. When she reached Marcus, she touched his shoulder. He looked up at her. His eyes were red, but he hadn't cried. Not yet. "Come on, baby," she said, softly. "Let's go home." He stood. Helen watched them leave, watched the way Diane held onto his arm like she was afraid he might disappear if she let go. When they were gone, Helen sat down again, alone in the empty courtroom. The fluorescent light still hummed, the radiator still rattled, and somewhere, outside those walls, the world kept moving. But in here, nothing had changed. Not yet. Before we continue, take a second and share your thoughts so far in this story below. I read every single one. 3 days later, Helen Garrett sat in her car outside the apartment building where Marcus lived. The same building from the photograph. Faded brick, iron fire escapes. A place that had seen better days, if it had ever seen better days at all. She'd been a public defender for 9 years, long enough to know that most of her clients were guilty, long enough to know that innocent until proven guilty was a nice idea that rarely survived contact with reality. But there was something about Marcus's case that stuck with her, something that didn't add up. She got out of the car and walked to the front entrance. The door was propped open with a brick. The hallway smelled like old carpet and something faintly chemical. She climbed the stairs to the second floor and knocked on apartment 2C. Diane Chen answered. She looked surprised. "Ms. Garrett." "Mrs. Chen, I'm sorry to drop by unannounced. I was hoping I could talk to Marcus for a few minutes." Diane hesitated, then stepped aside. "He's in his room." "But he hasn't been talking much. Not since court." Helen nodded. "I understand." The apartment was small. One bedroom, like Helen had said in court, but she hadn't mentioned how cramped it was. How the furniture was old and mismatched, like everything had been collected piece by piece from thrift stores and sidewalks. There was a couch with a blanket draped over it, probably where Marcus had been sleeping since his mother left. A small kitchen table with 2 chairs, a television on a milk crate. Diane led her to a door at the end of the hallway. She knocked gently. "Marcus, Ms. Garrett is here to see you." No response. Diane opened the door anyway. Marcus was sitting on the floor, back against the bed, knees pulled up to his chest. The room was barely big enough for the bed and a small dresser. No posters on the walls, no decorations, nothing that made it feel like a kid's room. Helen stepped inside. Diane closed the door behind her. "Hey, Marcus," Helen said quietly. She sat down on the floor across from him, her back against the dresser. "I know you probably don't want to talk to me. I know you're scared, but I need you to understand something." He didn't look at her. "I can't help you if you don't help me. And right now, the judge doesn't believe you. He doesn't believe that you were running from something. He thinks you're just a kid who made bad choices." Still nothing. Helen sighed. "Where's your mom, Marcus?" His jaw tightened. "I know she left after that night. I know she's not here. But I need to know where she is. Because if we can find her, if we can get her to testify about what Vincent Cross did—" "She won't," Marcus said. His voice was quiet, flat. "She won't come back." "How do you know?" "Because she told me." Helen frowned. "When?" "And 2 days after it happened. She called Grandma's phone. Said she was staying with a friend in Seattle. Said she needed space. Said—" He swallowed hard. Said it was better if I stayed with Grandma for a while. Did she say anything about Vincent? Marcus shook his head. She said it wasn't his fault, that I shouldn't have gotten involved, that I made it worse. Helen felt something cold settle in her chest. Marcus, look at me. He didn't. Marcus. Slowly he lifted his head. His eyes were empty, not angry, not sad, just empty. What happened that night? Helen said carefully. What Vincent Cross did to you, that wasn't your fault. Do you understand me? None of this is your fault. He looked away again. Helen wanted to say more, wanted to tell him that it would be okay, that she would fix this, that the system would work the way it was supposed to. But she'd been doing this job long enough to know better than to make promises she couldn't keep. Instead, she stood up. I'm going to keep fighting for you, Marcus, whether you believe me or not. Okay? He didn't answer. She left the room. Diane was waiting in the hallway, hands clasped together like she was praying. Is he going to be okay? Diane asked. Helen didn't know how to answer that. I'm going to do everything I can, she said. Diane's eyes filled with tears. That boy has been through so much. His father left when he was 3. His mother. She tries, but she's got her own demons. And now this. He's just a baby. He's just a baby. Helen put a hand on Diane's arm. I know. She left the apartment and walked back to her car. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the street. Somewhere in the distance, a siren wailed. Helen sat in the driver's seat and stared at the steering wheel. She had 3 weeks until trial. 3 weeks to build a case that the judge had already dismissed. 3 weeks to save a boy who didn't think he could be saved. Helen Garrett didn't sleep much that week. She spent her nights at the kitchen table in her small apartment, files spread out in front of her like puzzle pieces that didn't quite fit. Coffee going cold in a mug that said World's Okayest Lawyer, a gift from her sister, meant as a joke, but it felt a little too accurate most days. She'd requested the police reports from the night Vincent Cross attacked Marcus and his mother. It took 4 days and 3 phone calls to get them. When they finally arrived, they were thin, too thin. 2 officers had responded to a noise complaint at the apartment. By the time they arrived, Vincent Cross was gone. Angela Chen answered the door, told them everything was fine, just a disagreement, nothing to worry about. The officers noted signs of a struggle, overturned furniture, broken glass. But Angela insisted she didn't want to press charges, didn't want to make a statement, just wanted to be left alone. Marcus wasn't mentioned anywhere in the report. As far as the official record was concerned, he didn't exist that night. Helen called the police station and asked to speak to the officers who'd responded. One had retired. The other, Officer Raymond Keller, agreed to meet her at a diner on the north side of Portland. The diner was the kind of place that looked like it hadn't changed since 1987. Red vinyl booths, checkered floor, a jukebox in the corner that probably didn't work. Keller was already there when Helen arrived, sitting in a booth by the window, nursing a cup of coffee. He was in his mid-50s, graying hair, the kind of face that had seen too much and stopped being surprised by any of it. Helen slid into the seat across from him. Thanks for meeting me, she said. Keller nodded. You said this was about the Chen case? Yeah, the night you responded to the noise complaint, October 12th. He frowned, thinking. That was almost 3 months ago. You got the report? I did, but it doesn't tell me much. Not much to tell. Woman said there was an argument, said she was fine, didn't want us to do anything. We left. What about the boy? Keller's frown deepened. What boy? Marcus Chen, Angela's son. He was there that night. Keller shook his head. We didn't see any kid. You didn't see him, or he wasn't there? I mean, I don't remember seeing him. But the woman, Angela, she answered the door, talked to us in the hallway. We didn't go inside. Why not? She said she didn't want us to. Said everything was fine. We can't force our way in without cause. Helen leaned back, frustrated. Did you see anyone else? A man? Vincent Cross? Nope, just her. And you didn't think it was strange? All that damage, and she says it's nothing? Keller sighed. He looked out the window, watching cars go by. Lady, I've been doing this job for 30 years. You know how many domestic calls I've responded to where the victim doesn't want help? Where they cover for the guy who just put them in the hospital? It's not strange. It's normal. Depressing, but normal. Helen wanted to argue, wanted to tell him that he should have pushed harder, should have insisted, should have done something. But she knew it wouldn't change anything. The system was full of moments like this, moments where someone could have helped, could have intervened, but didn't. If you remember anything else, she said, anything at all, call me. She slid a business card across the table. Keller picked it up, glanced at it, then tucked it into his shirt pocket. Good luck with your case, Ms. Garrett. You're gonna need it. If you were Marcus's lawyer, looking at this case, what would you do? Share your thoughts in the comments. Helen spent the next 2 weeks tracking down anyone who might be able to corroborate Marcus's story. She talked to neighbors in the apartment building. Most of them had heard the fight that night, the yelling, the crashing, but none of them had seen Marcus. One woman, Mrs. Patel from apartment 2A, remembered seeing Angela in the hallway the next morning. Said she looked like she'd been crying, had a bruise on her cheek she tried to cover with makeup. I asked if she was okay, Mrs. Patel said. She said she was, but I knew she wasn't. Did you see her son? Helen asked. Mrs. Patel shook her head. I didn't even know she had a son until you just told me. Helen tracked down Angela's employer, a grocery store on the east side. The manager said Angela had called in sick the week after the incident, then quit over the phone. Said she was moving out of state. No forwarding address. Dead end after dead end. Helen tried to find Vincent. Cross. Ran his name through every database she had access to. Found 3 people with that name in Oregon. None of them matched the description Marcus had given. It was like the man had vanished. Or maybe he'd never existed in the first place. That was what the prosecution would argue. That Marcus had made the whole thing up. That there was no Vincent Cross. No fight. No reason to run. Just a kid who wanted money and made a bad decision. And without Angela, without Vincent, without any physical evidence or witnesses, how could Helen prove otherwise? The trial was in 6 days. Helen sat at her kitchen table, staring at the files, and felt the weight of it settle on her shoulders. This wasn't just about winning or losing. It was about a boy's life, about whether he'd spend the next few years in juvenile detention or whether he'd get a chance to be a kid again. She thought about what the judge had said. This boy doesn't have a case. He has excuses. Maybe he was right. Or maybe Helen just hadn't found the case yet. The night before trial, Helen got a phone call. It was late, almost 11. She was already in bed, half asleep, when her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She almost didn't answer, but something made her reach for it. Hello? Ms. Garrett. The voice was young, female, shaky. Yes, who is this? My name is Emma Chen. I'm Marcus's sister. Helen sat up. Emma, hi. Is everything okay? There was a pause. Helen could hear breathing on the other end of the line. Soft, uneven. I heard Grandma talking, Emma said. About the trial, about what the judge said. That Marcus doesn't have a case. Emma, it's late. Does your grandmother know you're calling me? No, she's asleep. I needed to talk to you. Because I was there. The night it happened. I was there. Helen's heart started beating faster. You were in the apartment? Yeah, in my room. I heard everything. Emma, listen to me very carefully. Have you told anyone else about this? The police? Anyone? No. Mom told me not to. She said it would just make things worse. But Marcus is in trouble, and it's not fair. He didn't do anything wrong. Helen grabbed a pen and a notepad from her nightstand. Okay, I need you to tell me exactly what you remember. Can you do that? Emma took a shaky breath. Vincent was yelling at my mom. He was mad because she didn't have money to give him. He said she was worthless, that we were all worthless. And then he started throwing things. I heard something break. And then my mom screamed. Helen was writing as fast as she could. Marcus came out of the living room, Emma continued. I heard him yelling at Vincent to stop. And then I heard something hit the wall. Hard. And Marcus made this sound. Like he couldn't breathe. What happened next? Vincent told Marcus to get out. Said if he didn't leave, he'd kill him. I heard the front door open. And then it got quiet. Did you see Marcus leave? No, I stayed in my room. I was scared. But I heard him. I heard him run down the stairs. Helen's hand was shaking. Emma, this is really important. Would you be willing to testify? To tell a judge what you just told me? There was a long silence. I don't know, Emma said finally. I'm scared. I know you are, but your brother needs you, and I promise I will do everything I can to keep you safe. Okay? Another pause. Okay, Emma whispered. Helen closed her eyes, relief flooding through her. Thank you, Emma. Thank you so much. I'm going to talk to your grandmother tomorrow, and we'll figure out the details. But you did the right thing by calling me. Miss Garrett? Yes? Is Marcus going to be okay? Helen didn't know how to answer that, so she told the truth. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure he is. When she hung up, Helen sat in the dark for a long time, staring at the note she'd written. It wasn't much. A 9-year-old's testimony. No physical evidence. No corroboration. But it was something. It was a crack in the prosecution's story. A thread she could pull. She just had to hope it would be enough. The next morning, Helen arrived at the courthouse an hour early. She met with Diane and Emma in a small conference room on the second floor. Emma looked even smaller in person than she'd sounded on the phone. Tiny for her age, with dark hair pulled back in a ponytail and eyes that seemed too old for a kid. Diane sat beside her, one arm around her granddaughter's shoulders. Are you sure about this? Diane asked, looking at Helen. She's just a baby. I know, Helen said gently, but she's also the only person who can tell the court what really happened that night. Diane looked down at Emma. Do you want to do this, sweetie? Emma nodded. She didn't look scared anymore. She looked determined. I want to help Marcus, she said. Helen knelt down so she was eye level with Emma. Okay, here's what's going to happen. When we go into the courtroom, the judge is going to ask you questions. So is the other lawyer. Some of the questions might be hard. Some of them might make you feel uncomfortable. But I need you to tell the truth, no matter what. Can you do that? Emma nodded again. Good. And if you get scared, or if you need to take a break, you just let me know, okay? Okay. Helen stood and looked at Diane. We'll take care of her. Diane's eyes were wet, but she nodded. At 9 o'clock, the bailiff called the court to order. Judge Caldwell entered, took his seat, and scanned the room. His gaze landed on Helen, then on the small girl sitting in the front row of the gallery. Ms. Garrett, he said, I wasn't aware you had a witness. We do, Your Honor, Emma Chen, the defendant's sister. The judge's eyebrows went up. How old is she? 9. He frowned. 9. Yes, Your Honor. And you think a 9-year-old is going to change the outcome of this case? Helen met his gaze. I think a 9-year-old who was there that night has a right to be heard. Judge Caldwell sighed. He looked at the prosecutor. Mr. Brennan, any objections? Brennan stood. He looked at Emma, then at Helen, then back at the judge. No objections, Your Honor. Let's hear what the child has to say. The way he said child made Helen's skin crawl. Very well, the judge said. Call your witness, Miss Garrett. Emma Chen walked to the witness stand like she was walking to the principal's office. Small steps, head down. When she sat in the chair, her feet didn't touch the ground. The bailiff approached with a Bible. Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? Emma's voice was barely a whisper. I do. Helen stood and walked toward the witness stand. She kept her voice soft, gentle, the same voice she used with her nieces and nephews. Hi, Emma. Can you tell the court your name? Emma Chen. And how old are you, Emma? 9. Do you know why you're here today? Emma nodded. To talk about what happened to Marcus. That's right. Now I know this might be hard, but I need you to tell the judge what you saw and heard on the night of October 12th. Can you do that? Emma looked at the judge. He was watching her with an expression that was hard to read. Not unkind, but not warm either. I was in my room, Emma said. I heard yelling. Vincent was mad. Who is Vincent? Helen asked. My mom's boyfriend. And what was he mad about? He wanted money. My mom said she didn't have any. And then he started throwing things. What kind of things? I don't know. I just heard crashing. And then my mom screamed. Helen glanced at the judge. He was leaning forward now, listening. What happened next, Emma? I heard Marcus yelling at Vincent to stop. And then I heard something hit the wall. Really hard. And Marcus made this sound. Like he was hurt. Did you see what happened? No, I stayed in my room. I was scared. Did you hear anything else? Emma nodded. Vincent told Marcus to get out. He said he'd kill him if he didn't leave. The courtroom was silent. And did Marcus leave? Helen asked. Yeah, I heard the door open. And then it was quiet. Helen let the words hang in the air for a moment. Then she turned to the judge. No further questions, Your Honor. Judge Caldwell looked at Brennan. Your witness, counselor. Brennan stood slowly. He buttoned his jacket and walked toward Emma with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Hi, Emma. My name is Mr. Brennan. I just have a few questions for you, okay? Emma nodded. You said you were in your room that night. Is that right? Yes. So you didn't actually see what happened. You just heard it. Emma hesitated. Yeah. And you said you heard your brother yelling at Vincent. But you didn't see Vincent hit your brother, did you? No. But I heard. You heard something. But you don't know what it was. It could have been anything, right? I guess. And when you heard the door open, you assumed it was your brother leaving. But you didn't actually see him leave, did you? No. Brennan nodded, like he'd just proven a point. Emma, do you love your brother? Yes. You'd do anything to help him, wouldn't you? I guess. So if someone told you that your brother needed you to say certain things that might help him stay out of trouble, you'd say them, wouldn't you? Helen stood. Objection, Your Honor. He's leading the witness. Sustained, the judge said. Mr. Brennan, ask your questions without the editorial. Brennan smiled. Of course, Your Honor. He turned back to Emma. Emma, did your brother or your grandmother or Ms. Garrett tell you what to say today? No. Are you sure? Yes. Because it would be really easy to make a mistake, to remember things wrong. especially when you're scared, when you want to protect someone you love. Emma's eyes filled with tears. I'm telling the truth. I'm sure you think you are, sweetheart. But sometimes, when we want something to be true, we convince ourselves it is, even if it's not. That's not. No further questions, Your Honor. Brennan walked back to his table, satisfied. Helen wanted to scream, wanted to stand up and tell the judge that Brennan was twisting a 9-year-old's words, making her doubt herself, making her look like a liar. But she knew that wouldn't help. So she stayed quiet. Judge Caldwell looked at Emma. You may step down. Emma climbed out of the chair and walked back to her grandmother. Diane pulled her close, whispering something Helen couldn't hear. The judge looked at Helen. Anything else, Ms. Garrett? Helen stood. Your Honor, I'd like to call Marcus Chen to the stand. The judge frowned. You're calling the defendant? Yes, Your Honor. Ms. Garrett, you know that's a risk. Anything he says can and will be used against him. I understand, Your Honor. But the jury... She stopped. There was no jury. This was a bench trial. Just the judge. Your Honor, I believe Marcus has a right to tell his side of the story. Judge Caldwell sighed. Very well. Call your witness. Before we go deeper, I would love to hear your point of view. Tell me what part has hit you the hardest in the story, and share your thoughts in the comments. Marcus walked to the witness stand the same way his sister had. Slow, uncertain. When he sat down, he looked at Helen, and for the first time since this whole thing started, she saw something other than emptiness in his eyes. She saw fear. Marcus, Helen said gently, I need you to tell the judge what happened on October 12th, starting from the beginning. Marcus swallowed hard. I was at home, with my mom and my sister. Vincent came over. He was drunk. He started yelling at my mom, saying she owed him money. What did you do? I told him to leave. I told him he couldn't talk to her like that. And what did he do? He grabbed me by the throat. He pushed me against the wall and said if I didn't get out, he'd kill me. So you left? Yeah. Where did you go? I didn't know. I just walked. I was scared. I didn't have anywhere to go. It was cold. I kept walking. And how did you end up at Mr. Fisher's house? I saw the light on. I thought maybe someone was awake. Maybe they could help. So you broke in. Marcus looked down. Yeah. Why didn't you knock on the door? I don't know. I wasn't thinking straight. I wanted to get inside. Somewhere warm. Somewhere safe. And what happened when Mr. Fisher found you? He grabbed me. I panicked. I thought he was going to hurt me. So I pushed him. I didn't mean to hurt him. I just wanted him to let go. Helen nodded. Thank you, Marcus. She sat down. Brennan stood. Marcus, he said, his voice sharp, you said Vincent Cross threatened you, that he told you he'd kill you. Is that right? Yes. And yet, when the police arrived that night, there was no mention of you in their report. Why is that? I don't know. I wasn't there when they came. Convenient. Objection, Helen said. Argumentative. Sustained, Brennan continued. Marcus, have you ever been arrested before? No. Have you ever been in trouble at school? No. So you're a good kid. Is that what you want the court to believe? And yet, on the night in question, you broke into a man's home, stole his money, and assaulted him. Does that sound like something a good kid would do? Marcus's hands were shaking. I didn't mean to. You didn't mean to break in? Or you didn't mean to steal? Or you didn't mean to assault an innocent man? I was scared. Scared, right. That's your excuse for everything, isn't it? You were scared, so you committed a felony. You were scared, so you hurt an old man. You were scared, So none of this is your fault. That's not... No further questions. Brennan sat down. Marcus looked at Helen, and she saw it in his eyes. The same thing she'd seen in Emma's eyes. The fear that no one would believe him, that no matter what he said, it wouldn't matter. Judge Caldwell looked at both lawyers. Closing arguments? Brennan went first. He stood at the center of the courtroom, hands clasped behind his back, and spoke with the kind of confidence that came from knowing he'd already won. Your Honor, this case is simple. The defendant committed a crime. Multiple crimes. He broke into a home. He stole money. He assaulted the homeowner. These are facts. Facts supported by evidence, by witness testimony, by the defendant's own admission. He paused, letting the words settle. The defense wants you to believe that the defendant is a victim, that he was running from something, that he was scared. And maybe he was. But being scared doesn't give you the right to hurt other people. Being scared doesn't excuse breaking the law. He turned to look at Marcus. The defendant had choices. He could have called the police. He could have gone to a neighbor. He could have done 100 different things that didn't involve breaking into a stranger's home. But he didn't. He made a choice, a bad choice. And now he has to face the consequences. Brennan turned back to the judge. The state asks that you find the defendant guilty on all charges, not because we want to punish a child, but because justice demands it. Thank you, Your Honor. He sat down. Helen stood. Her legs felt heavy. Her mouth was dry. She walked to the center of the room and looked at the judge. Your Honor, Mr. Brennan is right about one thing. Marcus made a choice. He chose to run. He chose to survive. Because on that night, survival was the only option he had. She paused. Marcus is 14 years old. He's a child who was thrown out of his home by a man who threatened to kill him. A child who had nowhere to go, no one to turn to. And yes, he made a mistake. He broke into a home that wasn't his. But he didn't do it out of greed. He didn't do it out of malice. He did it because he was terrified and alone and desperate. Helen's voice grew stronger. The prosecution wants you to believe that Marcus had other options, that he could have called the police. But how? He didn't have a phone, that he could have gone to a neighbor. But which neighbor? The ones who heard his mother screaming and did nothing? The ones who saw bruises on her face and looked the other way? She looked at Marcus. He was staring at his hands again. This boy didn't choose to be in that situation. He didn't choose to have a mother who couldn't protect him. He didn't choose to have a man in his home who threatened his life. But he did choose to survive. And that's what this case is really about. Not whether Marcus broke the law, but whether we, as a society, are willing to punish a child for trying to stay alive. Helen turned back to the judge. Your Honor, I'm asking you to see Marcus for who he really is. Not a criminal, not a threat, but a scared kid who made a terrible decision in an impossible situation. A kid who deserves a second chance. She sat down. The courtroom was silent. Judge Caldwell looked down at the papers in front of him. He was quiet for a long time. So long that people started shifting in their seats. So long that Marcus finally looked up, eyes wide, waiting. Finally, the judge spoke. I've been on the bench for 17 years. I've seen a lot of cases, a lot of kids. And I'll be honest with you, when I first read the file on this case, I thought it was open and shut. A kid breaks into a home, steals money, assaults the homeowner. Guilty. Simple. He paused. But then I heard Emma's testimony, and I heard Marcus's testimony, and I started thinking about something my father used to say. He was a judge too, and he told me that the law isn't just about punishment. It's about understanding, or about seeing the whole picture. He looked at Marcus. Marcus, what you did was wrong. There's no getting around that. You broke the law, you hurt someone, and there have to be consequences for that. But, he paused again, but I also believe that you were put in an impossible situation, that you were scared, that you didn't know what else to do, and I believe that locking you up won't help you. It won't help Mr. Fisher. It won't help anyone. Helen felt her heart start to beat faster. So here's what I'm going to do, the judge said. I'm going to find you guilty of trespassing and theft, but I'm going to dismiss the assault charge. Mr. Fisher has indicated he doesn't wish to press charges on that count, and given the circumstances, I don't believe it serves justice to pursue it. He looked at Helen, then at Brennan, then back at Marcus. For the trespassing and theft charges, I'm sentencing you to 2 years of probation. You'll be required to complete 100 hours of community service. You'll attend counseling sessions twice a week, and you'll write a letter of apology to Mr. Fisher. He leaned forward. But here's the thing, Marcus. This is your second chance. Your only second chance. If you mess this up, if you get in trouble again, if you violate your probation, if you so much as jaywalk, I will send you to juvenile detention. Do you understand me? Marcus nodded, tears streaming down his face. Yes, Your Honor. Good. Then we're done here. The gavel came down, and just like that, it was over. The gallery erupted in whispers. Reporters scribbled notes. Diane Chen was crying, her hands pressed to her mouth. Emma sat beside her, a small smile on her face. Helen turned to Marcus. He was still crying, but he was smiling too. The kind of smile that comes from relief, from disbelief, from realizing you're going to be okay. Thank you, he whispered. Helen put a hand on his shoulder. You did this. Marcus, you told your story. You were brave. No, you were. Helen smiled. We both were. Outside the courtroom, Diane pulled Marcus into a hug so tight it looked like she'd never let go. Emma wrapped her arms around both of them. Helen stood a few feet away, watching. Brennan walked past her, briefcase in hand. That was a hell of a closing, Garrett, he said. Thanks. Don't get used to it. You got lucky today. Helen looked at him. It wasn't luck. He shrugged and walked away. A few weeks later, Helen got a letter in the mail. It was handwritten on lined paper that looked like it had been torn out of a notebook. Dear Ms. Garrett, I wanted to say thank you for everything you did for me. I know I didn't make it easy. I know I didn't always believe you. But you didn't give up on me, even when it seemed like everyone else had. I'm doing better now. I'm staying with my grandma. I'm going to counseling. I'm trying to figure out how to be a kid again. My mom called last week. She said she's sorry. She said she wants to come home. I don't know if I'm ready for that, but I'm trying to figure it out. Anyway, I just wanted you to know that what you did mattered. You saved my life, and I'll never forget that. Thank you. Marcus Helen read the letter 3 times. Then she folded it carefully and put it in her desk drawer next to all the other letters from clients who'd written to say thank you. There weren't many, but there were enough. Enough to remind her why she did this job. Enough to make the long nights, the low pay, the impossible cases worth it. Because sometimes, even when the world tells you a kid doesn't have a case, you fight anyway. And sometimes you win. Marcus Chen went on to finish high school. He graduated with honors. He got a scholarship to Portland State University, where he studied social work. He wanted to help kids like him, kids who didn't have anyone in their corner. Emma grew up strong and brave. She never forgot the day she walked into that courtroom and told the truth. She became a teacher, and every time she met a student who seemed lost, who seemed scared, she remembered her brother, and she made sure they knew someone cared. Diane Chen lived to see both her grandchildren graduate college. She passed away peacefully in her sleep at the age of 83, surrounded by family, knowing that the boy she'd raised had turned out just fine. And Helen Garrett? She kept doing what she'd always done, fighting for the ones who couldn't fight for themselves, showing up, believing in second chances, because that's what justice is supposed to be. Not punishment, not revenge, but a chance to do better, a chance to heal, a chance to be seen. And in a cold courtroom in Portland, Oregon, on a Tuesday morning in late October, a boy named Marcus Chen got that chance. Because someone believed him. And that made all the difference. Thank you for watching this story from Justice Tales. If Marcus and Emma's courage moved you, if Helen's fight reminded you why we never give up on people, hit that like button, subscribe to this channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. What moment in this case struck you the most? What would you have done if you were in Marcus's shoes, or Helen's, or even the judge's? I read every comment, and I want to hear from you. These stories matter because they remind us that justice isn't just about the law. It's about the people behind it. Until the next story, remember, everyone deserves to be heard. Take care.